thing
Ah,
for those that aren't able to attend. Yeah.
Leander, we
Thank
gotta learn
you.
this AI otter pilot. It's pretty rad. All right. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Aubrey Owens, the Director for Disability Resources and a program called UCAM here at SOU. I've been here for 10 years and 5 years in a director position. And in that 5 years, Lander has also been my assistant director during this time. So really grateful. I had the pleasure of working all 10 of my years with Robin at SOU. So, and I know Jesse is on this call too. So I have a few former colleagues, current colleagues that I'm really pleased we get to share about our experience and how we've built up a synergy between our programs. Leander, you want to do your intro?
Hi, good morning, everyone. So thank you for joining us in this presentation today. So my pronouns are ella, she, her, hers. I am currently working, as Aubrey said, as an assistant director, and I've been here for a little more than 5 years now. So I'm glad to be here today. And yeah, and I've been working my professional life between international education and now disability resources work. So higher education, basically.
Yeah, an amazing knowledge set. Well, I'm going to share screen, Robin. I'll do the share screen, Leander, since your interwebs are being wonky. And kind of kick us off. And as I said before, please pop in the chat or raise your hand as we go through things so we can make sure we're addressing all of your questions. How many folks on the call are, let me get back to your faces, working with SSS programs predominantly, and McNair, and then DSS programs? So predominantly SSS is what it sounded like. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, this still qualifies because you have students with disabilities.
And some pre-college folks are in here as well.
Ooh, pre-college.
And McNair.
And McNair. Okay. Leandra, this is where I'll let you kind of kick it off for us.
Okay, so yeah, so let's start about what we are going to be talking today. So we don't want to overwhelm you, obviously. So we want to go like basic for now, and then this would be a really good conversation to probably develop other topics, right? Other presentations. So we would be glad to do that as well. So then let's see, we want to understand what a qualifying disability are, in higher education, operational procedures of disability resources offices. So we want you to understand how we operate our procedures. What is the prevalence of various types of disabilities in our campus, effective strategies for advising disabled students, and collaborative efforts between TRIO programs and DRA offices. And obviously, we are going to have the most interesting section, the Q&A session. So next slide.
All right.
And some of the goals today, you want to talk, Aubrey?
Go for it.
Okay, yeah, I'll go for it. So then we are going to understand the legal definition of disability and why it matters. And I have to say that this is a little bit different from high school. And now that we have some colleagues from that area, of that field, so it is important to understand the difference. Have a working knowledge of the broad range of disabilities at your institution, and have an understanding of best practices in working with your disabled student population, and a bank of resources that we are going to share with you. So okay, so this is basically Disability Resources 101. So our mission usually, and basically in most of our institutions in higher education, is to ensure equal access to all educational, co-curricular, and housing opportunities for registered students. And equal access, it's different from success in high school. So that's a big difference that we need our families to understand when they're coming from K-12 system that we cannot guarantee success. So, okay, so then that means that we will be providing all the resources, all the accommodation that we would be speaking about, so to ensure equal access, right? So that's a big difference. And obviously we are committed to full compliance with the Americans with Disability Act of 1990 and Section 504. So those are basically our legal timeframes and standards to work with our students. And obviously these laws prohibit discrimination against qualified persons with disabilities, as well as other applicable federal and state laws pertaining to individuals with disabilities. And that's another difference, because in the K-12 system, they have to work with the IDEA or IDEA law. So that's another kind of law, right? And that is where they would like to guarantee the success, but not here. Here is equal access, ADA, and 504. So basically that's the the body of.
I think part of too what is so wonderful about partnering with our TRIO programs at our institutions is because our focus is on implementing accommodations for equal access. These are still students that want and need tutoring, may need more intensive advising, may need more touchstones on campus. And that's where TRIO really comes into play is, okay, we've implemented all of the appropriate accommodations for the student to have the opportunity to demonstrate their knowledge and abilities. And like all other students may have tutoring needs. College is hard. And that's where, to steal one of Kim's terms, braiding together our programs to benefit the students is really a beautiful synergy that we target.
Okay, so what is a disability under these laws? So basically it's a condition or impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, and that includes physical, mental, learning, and chronic health. So we have a lot of categories there, including some kind of disorders, illnesses. And yeah, so as we stated here, so we would have, that may include deaf and hard of hearing, seizure, epilepsy, mobility, visual impairments, autoimmune or chronic disorders, learning disorders, cognitive disabilities, speech disabilities, food allergies, and I left to the end psychological disabilities because they are not apparent. And sometimes those are the most difficult to, well, to notice, but to make assumptions, or probably you or the students probably may think, oh, but I have anxiety. Should I qualify, or may I qualify to get accommodations? So that it's really important to be mindful that psychological disabilities or non-apparent disabilities are included there as a disability where students can get accommodations. So that's important to point out, I would say.
Yeah. I think
Leandro, we had a question about if diabetes counts as one of those chronic disorders.
Yes. Yes. So that is under probably chronic health category, and I would say that I have students with diabetes like getting accommodations currently, because if you have sugar levels difficulties, it may affect your body in terms of cognitive abilities, fatigue. You can feel so fatigued and exhausted. So that can be an impairment to study, to sleep. You can actually have physical impairment because you physically don't feel good. And it's really, sometimes if you don't have a controlled diabetes, so it is actually hard to attend classes sometimes, and you have to double check your sugar level. So you need break to go out, double check your sugar levels, and then if you need to take something to eat. So definitely diabetes can be a chronic health impairment for students.
I think that's the important part too of how the ADA has defined disability is it's intentionally very, very broad. a condition or an impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So there is no such thing as like a comprehensive list of disabilities that qualify. It really is an interactive process with our offices to understand what's the condition and does it rise to a level of disability. So like Leandra mentioned earlier, anxiety can be disabling, but it also may not be, or it may be episodic. And same with diabetes, well controlled until it's not, and you have a high or a low and you cannot get to class. So we talk through that stuff with students to figure it out. And it's okay if it's not constant, continuous, or even apparent. Disabilities exist even when, you know, folks are not in an active or flared state. We prepare for what they may need in the event that they're at their worst.
Yeah, and we have students, and we can have like 3 students with the same diagnosis or disabilities, and all of them are receiving a lot of different kind of accommodation because it's based on their specific needs in that moment. So
Yeah, it's individualized process, right, Leandra? I can't remember
Mhm.
on our slide deck, but it is a student-centered, individualized process, and what works well for one student with diabetes won't work well for another student with diabetes, you know, so this is, it is student-centered and student-led. So that's the other piece, is helping folks learn how to self-advocate and ask for the things they need, and that's a big piece of how we can help and partner together to educate students on how to access the services that they need.
Yeah. So you haven't, so if you can, an example of our demographics, we put some data and statistics here. Obviously that was from the fall 2023. So in our campus, and I'm pretty sure that these mirror a lot of the higher education institutions or disability offices throughout the nation. So in this case, for example, if you can see the highest percentage of students seeking accommodation in our office are those who have a mental health diagnosis, and mental health / psychological, that is anxiety, depression, PTSD, bipolar, etc. Right? So that is more or less in a total, if we talk about a total. So we had 380 students in the fall. Now I would say that we have more. So basically we would say that it is probably 9, 10, 11, 12% of our student population registered in the art. So in SAU. It is interesting at the same time, because if you go to the national statistics in, back in 2019, 2020, so there was a 21% of students in higher education, but not necessarily all of them are registered in DR. So probably we have more students dealing with impacts and needs, and they are not registered in our offices because actually it's voluntary. It's not a mandatory step that they need to go through our office and get registered because you have this and this and this, right? It's totally voluntary, right? So we cannot mandate a student, oh, but you need to go and register with DR. It's not like that. So so probably our campuses have more disabled students than we have in our offices, registered in our offices. So that's a good probably statistics and data to know. And obviously we have to be in that sense, like open to talk about disabilities and sensitive and empathetic, because probably we are going to have a student who may have a disability, but it's not registered. So probably we will have to have that conversation with the student to guide them through the resources and tools. And we are going to talk a little bit more about that later. So
I do think it's interesting to think about, not all of them being registered with DR, which is their choice. I think that's the agency component too, coming out of K-12 systems where they may have been on a 504 and IEP plan, and that just gets rolled out and automated, and they get carried along down the river through that process. And now suddenly they have to self-advocate and identify. There is a lot of magical thinking we've noticed of freshmen coming into college thinking, okay, things are different now. I don't need this service anymore. And then floundering horribly, right? Or maybe they're okay and they get by a few terms, but and this is where I think partnering with our TRIO offices, like I know Robin and Jesse have had those conversations with students, like, okay, on your application, you said, no, you're not disabled, but then you also have mentioned anxiety or depression. You may have a qualifying disability to register with DR and explore accommodations if you feel like you need that kind of support, and helping, again, that warm handoff between offices.
Okay, so I think that we touched this point. So as we discussed, it is really important to have the student as the center. So it's a one-on-one process, individualized, a conversation that is confidential and private, between the student and our staff. And that's what we call an interactive process. So we need to have that conversation with the student, not the parents, not a family member, but the students themselves. So they need to be able to let us know what their needs are, so we can probably talk about different kind of accommodations to address those challenges or impacts. And obviously, we are here to provide academic accommodations, housing accommodations, but we cannot compromise essential components of the classroom or the classes, right? So we have an accommodation for presentation and judgment, right? So probably the student would not have to present in front of the classroom. But if there is an oral communication where actually the major outcome is to prove the student is able to develop the skills, like to present in front of the classroom. So probably that accommodation is not appropriate. So it actually fundamentally alter the outcomes. So we need to have that conversation with student, faculty, and our office. So that's interactive. So and then how can disability resources help students? So we obviously set up and put in place those accommodations. So we have a lot of entities involved here. So we have the student because it's the center. So we have our office, and we also have faculty members. So it's a conversation among all the parties involved. And obviously then, in that process, we also can have appointment meeting with the student to develop, self-advocacy skills, learning strategy skills. So we do have that support in our office as well. And obviously, we like to coordinate support alongside other partners on campus. So we have actually in NSAU, so we work directly with the Office of the Dean of Students and Student Life and Student Health and Wellness Center, Title IX office. We have a coaching and mentoring program called UCAM, University Coaching and Academic Mentoring. We have obviously our colleagues from the TRIO programs, and that is Student Success here in SAU. And we also have a McNair program, but obviously in other campuses, you also have other TRIO programs where you can seek support. We have tutoring services, career connections, university housing. So these are several offices that we are constantly communicating to. So yeah, it's really, really a good synergy, as Aubrey said. And we are really, really fortunate to have open communication and good communication with all these programs and services on campus. And actually, we are going to talk a little bit more about that, because actually one of the thing that I really like from our office is that we have a weekly meeting with most of these services on campus, just to talk about our students in common. So, and how can we best support them? So yeah, that's a coordinated support that we like to have on campus.
Yeah, who's doing what, if you will, because we've definitely had situations where we're duplicating efforts. And we definitely have students who sometimes get over-resourced, and so we don't want to overwhelm them too.
Exactly. And just to have an idea about some examples of accommodations offered, and I would say that probably we have two big categories on campus. So we have academic accommodations for the classroom, and we also have on-campus housing accommodations. For the classroom, for example, we do have testing accommodations. So for that purpose, we have a testing room or a testing center. We have note-taking services, and we use technology for that. We don't use note takers or other students as note takers anymore. So we actually rely on technology. We have an alternate format test. So that's basically the conversion of textbook into digital books or ebooks. So we do have technology as well as Speechify, the text-to-speech software. We have interpreting and captioning for deaf and hard of hearing population, learning strategies, and organizational support. That is not basically an accommodation, but it's a support that we have in our office as well as the problem solving skills and advocacy. And we do have a DR peer engagement coordinator. So basically it is a peer-to-peer support student that we hired. So, we use a platform called AIMS, and they have to request accommodation through a platform. So we have the student as our peer engagement coordinator who will be there to assist the student in these steps or procedures. On-campus housing, so we do have single room as an accommodations. We have wheelchair accessible housing rooms, deaf accessible equipment for housing, meal plan adjustments, and assistance animal that may include service animals and emotional support animals. So those are different categories, but it involves animals on campus. So we can talk about a lot of accommodation, but those are probably the regular ones. Okay, so this is basically the steps that a lot of students have to go through, usually not only in SOU, but I would say overall in higher education. It may vary in the application or the platform or technology they use, but basically the first step that we usually ask to the student is to get registered, filling out an application. So that application is really important. In our case, we have it online. So if you are with a student and you had the conversation and they said, yes, I would like to get registered with DR. So that is an easy way to, okay, so let's sit down and just go directly to their website and fill out your application. They can do it with you, but if they want to, because of their privacy or their confidentiality, they are able to do it at home, in their free time. So they just go to the application, and that's where they would be providing us with some information. Probably they would be able to talk about their needs, the impact that they are currently dealing with. So then as an access consultant, so we are going to have some information beforehand just to probably prepare ourselves about, okay, so they are saying that these are the impacts, so probably we can talk about these and these and these accommodations, so we can probably be better prepared to support them during that next step, that is the intake process. So then they fill out the application. We are going to invite them to schedule an intake appointment. That would be the intake process, where we are going to sit down with the student, talk about their needs in a confidential space. Online, in our case, it would be online, in person, phone. So we provide all the means possible. So then after that intake process, so we are going to ask for documentation and review the documentation, because we need to document the student disabilities in order to provide permanent accommodations. I believe, yes, I put the provisional ones. Okay, so the next step, accommodations are assigned, but I usually like to emphasize that, yes, we are going to provide accommodations, provisional if it's needed. Okay, so if we don't receive documentation at that time during that intake process, because probably the student does not have that documentation, they have to ask their parents, or they have to go through a screening evaluation. So we will be able to provide provisional accommodation. So if you are with a student and they tell you, oh no, I don't know, because I don't I don't have that documentation. I've never been diagnosed before, so it doesn't matter. Please guide them through our office. Take them to our office, because we will be able to have that conversation with the student and provide provisional accommodation, so they will have time to get that documentation. And we are super flexible in terms of, okay, they need those provisional accommodations for 1-2 terms, so we will be able to do that. So don't hesitate to, to refer them to our office if they don't have documentation. So that is really important to know. And I like to point out that specific detail, because it is important for the student to be more relaxed if they don't have documentation. So we don't want to put additional barriers or hurdles to the students. So
Yeah.
so then we are going to implement the accommodations. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Aubrey.
I was just thinking, well, we see so often, we already know disproportionately highest population of students registered with our office. And I'd say the national statistics hold up is that mental health related disabilities. And we know emerging mental health as a young adult between the years of 19 to 25 is when a lot of people do receive a new mental health diagnosis. College is a very stressful time. And so, we don't want to, as Leandra said, put up additional barriers for folks. If they know something's going on with them, we can help connect them to an outside psychologist for an evaluation, on-campus counseling, all of those things to help resource them to get the support and diagnosis.
Yeah. And then an implementation of accommodation, that's, I mentioned before that the implementation, obviously it involved technology in our case, because we have an automatic process to send to faculty members our letters of accommodation, so the instructor can be informed. So all the parties are involved, student, faculty, and our office. So then we implement the accommodation, we let the faculty member know about it, so we are ready to go. So then usually we also like to check in with our students. So we have a formal, I would say, procedure to, hey, probably during midterms. So we send an email, hey, students, we are here. We would like to know how everything's going. It's good, it's bad. It doesn't matter, just let us know. It's something, it's working, perfect. If not, please be in touch with us. So during midterms, usually we have more traffic of students, because probably that's when they realize, I'm not doing well, I need support. So that's probably when we start like communicating to each other, hey trio, the student may need support, tutoring services, or we need to refer the student to the dean of student or the student health and wellness center, because they need counseling. So we need to we like to have that communication, or keeping that communication means open with our students, because we need to support their time here. And so how are services helping the student, problem solving, and that's about extensions for assignments, self-advocacy, testing services, communication with faculty, so you name it. So so we need to check in with them just to problem solve things. So
yeah. And I think part of it is for us is initiating that outreach is kind of like a, hey, remember, we're still here. We're here to support you. A lot of students will request their accommodations at the beginning of the term, and that's really the only step they have to do to get their accommodations. In most cases, sometimes there are a little more complex details that we have to work out with faculty, but then they kind of forget that we're here. And so trying to solicit from folks, and particularly when folks are really having a hard time in mental health, reaching out, picking up a phone, sending an email, any of those things is really, really hard. So if we can solicit that communication from folks, even better. Next. All right. So a general overview of the process and ADA / higher ed. Any questions before I kick us into the next section? Cool. So trying to kind of distill down what would be helpful information for you all is figuring out where we're at. And I don't know where you're at in your knowledge base and your experience with folks. So again, please holler if you have a specific question. But we mentioned earlier, students are not required to disclose disability information to their advisor or anybody. So really the intent and purpose of any DR office at a higher ed institution is for that confidentiality. So to ensure that we are holding their documentation and diagnoses confidentially. We're contracted under FERPA. We cannot release that information unless there's a FERPA in place, right? And so, you know, you may have students that very openly discuss their disability with you, and you may have students that don't really feel comfortable disclosing, and anything in between, and that's okay. We do expect students with disabilities to meet the same standards of performance as other students, because they are here because of their abilities. So again, going back to IDEA protocols and processes, a lot of students may have had modified assignments or, you know, certificate of attendance, even graduating with a diploma. And I've definitely had students who didn't graduate with a regular diploma from high school. There's a lot of managing expectations about what higher ed accommodations look like and do, but also really empowering the student and the individual that they are capable. We have a lot of resources and programs to support them on campus. And here's what the accommodations can look like here at SOU. So two people with the same disability can look very differently. We know this. That's why it's very individualized. And I think this is the part that we've had a really fabulous synergy between our TRIO offices and DRs at the back and forth. We refer a lot of students to TRIO here. And what I love about our TRIO program is we have the referral form on the website. As soon as I've met with a student or our team meets with a student, we're like, oh, you would be a great TRIO candidate. Even if they meet that just with a disability category, I submit and let Kim figure it out. Do they qualify? Great. I think one of the kind of distinctions here is how y'all qualify folks as having a disability and what your internal process is. Does it mean that they have to have registered with DR? And I think in most cases, that's probably what's true. Ooh, hey, didn't mean to do that. So an interesting thing that's come up through our TRIO offices, and I know I mentioned it earlier, is that students sometimes don't really know or identify as having a disability. So when they see that question on the application, they're like, yeah, no, I walk, I'm able-bodied, I don't have a disability. But really, they may have a qualifying disability. And that's anytime I think you're having a student disclose something like that, it would be great to just refer them to DR and explain, hey, you may qualify for services and or additional supports. Because we'll work our process and see is what they're reporting to you something that qualifies as significant impairment to one or more major life functions. So as Leander mentioned, we've historically had a team meeting between Disability Resources, UCAM, and our TRIO teams on a weekly basis to staff our shared students and student needs. And so making sure we are all aware, we have a lot of various systems that we all document within. I don't access Bloomin', and my TRIO team doesn't necessarily access AIM, our internal database, but we also have another database with the Dean of Students office. There's a whole slew of ways in which we can acquire information and understand how they're being intervened on. Yeah, hey, Kim.
So I just wanted to say too, as a TRIO office, when we do our intake interview, the way that we phrase the question, we don't ask if they have a disability. The question is more phrased like, is there anything that could be a barrier to you being successful in college? For a lot of students is, no, I don't have a disability, but yeah, I suffer from anxiety or I have these other issues that would be a barrier to me being successful. So it's also kind of educating students around what a disability even is.
Yeah.
When Aubrey and I were talking about this session, just sort of like, a lot of people are like, you have a disability if you're in a wheelchair, and that's the only definition in their head. So they don't think of themselves as having a disability. But then when asked, rephrasing the question, I was like, hey, like, what could stand in your way of being successful? They're like, oh yeah, I've got this whole laundry list of things.
Right. yeah, you have to kind of tease it out sometimes. And I think we do too, even when we have a student who shows up in our office and they're like, I don't know why I'm here. Someone just referred me and told me I should connect with you. So there is a lot of education around, yeah, disability, and we'll get a couple of slides in around what we do and stuff and materials we have on our website too. So, you know, knowing how your university provides accommodations, so you can be that kind of partner advocate when you're in a session with a student as their advisor of, you know, a general scope of how that process looks. And sometimes demystifying it for students can make it seem less intimidating, you know, especially I hear from folks all the time like, oh, wow, you still call yourselves disability resources. Doesn't that seem aversive to folks registering with your office? And you know, we've had that debate many a time. For us, it's a reclaiming of that disability isn't a bad word. But we also know that's still something that folks struggle with, and that kind of internalized stigma. So I think it's having partners on campus who know how DR offices work, what their kind of ethos is, and how we approach folks. We don't just work with you based on label. We work with you as the individual. So for us, documented disability can mean a number of things, actually. A licensed professional who provides an official diagnosis. So the medical provider working within the scope of their licensure, providing medical information and how it impacts that individual and how severe it is. And professional judgment. We've definitely had students in situations, we've had Lynn Bento students and you know, emancipated students who have no access to former records, but you know, describe and provide a narrative report around what they've experienced and what they know that they've been diagnosed with, and using our observation. And then if we need that tertiary piece of documentation, we will refer them to our Student Health and Wellness Center or outside psychologist. Finding out if your DR office does provisional accommodations. I think kind of from our national listservs, reading into it, most places do, but not all. And for us, that's, again, as Leandra pointed out, working with students, particularly veterans, getting documentation from the VA is a huge pain in the ass. They often can't even access their own medical documentation in the VA portal. So, you know, we want to work with folks, and we don't want the other healthcare related barriers that pop up for folks to be an impact. And then we do work with students with temporary injuries, you know, athletes with concussions, a variety of things, you know, so we are invoking ADA protection for those students for a limited time period. So we know they're probably going to get better by this date. We'll check in and see, do you need more accommodations? And what does that look like? But, you know, for the purposes of an acute injury, it would be appropriate for our office to do that. Oh, I like my little sun bubble. Do you have a referral form like our TRIO office has, where stakeholders across campus, when they meet with a student, could plop in a quick referral form, and then you could send an application or invite them for an interview, and an easy pipeline for folks. Strategies. So in advising, and you probably already do this, but these are some of the high level notes that we were thinking of. Do you have access to course syllabi, or do you have a bank of syllabi that would help you know how to educate the student on the demands of the course? So if you have a student who said, yeah, I'm dyslexic and I really struggle even with my accommodations to complete written or reading work, navigating when they should take a real writing or reading heavy course and stacking their schedule accordingly, or maybe reviewing a former syllabi with them. A lot of students with disabilities struggle with navigating multiple platforms. Moodle, all the various STEM softwares, even in our business program, they use my office business. Robin, you can tell me which one that was. I can't even remember off the top. It's a lot. It's like platform overload. And it's extraordinarily difficult for students with disabilities particularly ADHD, to have that executive functioning ability to know, okay, I need to go here to submit that assignment, and I need to go to this Kahoots quiz to make sure I complete that piece, right? Like all of these little, the minutia. So helping them get comfortable with those platforms, or maybe making out a to-do list of what goes where. A simple to-do list with no more than maybe 5 steps, right? Break it down into chunks, tasks, or priorities. So sometimes I make myself my to-do list and they get really overwhelming really fast. So let's do the highlights, right? Top 5, what actually has to get done in the next 2 to 3 days. Information and alternate means. So students who have, auditory processing delays or disabilities, right, in a meeting with you may seem like the communication's going really smoothly, they're totally understanding, and then you find out like a week later they were completely lost and haven't followed up on any of the things that you advised them to do. So, building in a practice of just a follow-up email of, hey, here's what we discussed in our meeting today. Let me know when we meet again how that list went, or however you like to do it. And again, yeah, strategizing around course schedule, and then topic areas for the student. What areas will they struggle? If they are a student registered with DR, and I think Leandra mentioned, we have an accommodation, we call it part-time as full-time. So most of the time at SOU, students do have to have at least 12 credits to remain in student housing. If they're a student that struggles with maintaining a full course load because of their disability, we will use that part-time as full-time accommodation, so they will not get evicted from housing and can actually be strategic around the courses they're enrolled in per term. So when disability impacts mobility, figuring out, course schedule, again, how much time, how far across campus are you going, that kind of things, thinking through those things. I think a lot of students with mobility related impairments are typically pretty good about that, because that's their day-to-day life, like getting from point A to point B, but being mindful as an advisor, right? And, sometimes students get pushed to take a class because they need to. This is part of your major, this is part of your program or degree path. And it's only going to be offered this term, and that can feel really stressful. Thinking through, alternative options if that's not going to work for them as much as possible. Yeah, also, so students with disabilities who may receive extended testing time may have a hard time having a really compressed course load. So they'll miss out on a part of class when they use their full test accommodation. And that kind of stinks and puts them at a further disadvantage. Part of our accommodation process is that they could reschedule to take that exam at a different time, so they don't have to miss class or cut their exam time short. Medication impacts. Also something to be we think about and talk about with students. A lot of our students with ADHD will say, I take my Strattera or my Focalin or whatever it is early in the morning, and then I have like a booster pill I can take in the afternoon, but like by 3 o'clock I'm done. I can't focus, I can't think. And that's also a consideration in schedule. Yeah, teaching style. So I think learning who your faculty are has been a huge piece of this too, through our UCAM coaches and our repository of knowledge with our student success coordinators or academic advisors, really getting a sense for what the pedagogy is may be very helpful. And yeah, trying to find and strike a balance. It's not always perfect or possible, but those are the considerations that I think a student with a disability would say they feel seen or heard. And it may not be perfect, but their advisor is working with them to meet a need as much as possible within the scope of our abilities, right? So language matters. So the other part of being a disability ally or an approachable person is going to be around how we talk about disability. So there's always this debate, I think, any kind of protected identity class. Do you say this is a dyslexic person, or do you say this is a person with dyslexia? So identity first communication may be a preference, an individual preference. I can tell you though, person first language, we hear this particularly from my peer engagement coordinator, Merlin. I'm an autistic student. I'm an autistic student and I embrace that. That is true. So it is personal. So that's the part where take their lead with it, or even ask outright. How would you like to talk about the impacts of your disability? What are you comfortable with? And how do you like to identify yourself when we're talking about these things? Yeah, anything to add to that, Leandra?
Yeah, this is really, really an individual decision and perception. I would say that I have students who identify themselves as an identity first language, and I have other students who prefer person first language. So it's, again, interactive process, you know, a close conversation with the student, empathetic conversation. So yeah, so then it's like the pronouns, right? So you can ask gently to the person, oh, what are your pronouns? Or what are your preference? So so this is more or less the same, you know, ask, what would you prefer? So yeah, so we don't have, I would say, a formal stand for so because it depends on the students, and we are really respectful about that because we are student centered. So
Beautifully said. Understanding ableism. So I do think it gets thrown around pretty profusely at times. So making sure we understand what ableism is. It's not it's not just individual. It does happen at an individual level, but it is talking through a systemic oppression of disabled people. So I think about, for instance, the fact that we still are in a place in America where we say folks have to document their disabilities to prove that they're a participant of this class of people. We don't do that with any other protected class of individual, which is interesting. And most of the time, I know the reasons why, but what an interesting systemic thing that is still occurring for people with disabilities. So what we can do is obviously be advocates for protected rights under the ADA, you know, be cognizant of our language and inclusive. It takes work, like active anti-racism. It takes work to kind of reframe our language and how we talk about things, or being comfortable using the word disability or what have you. And maybe that's kind of in step with your DR office on your campus. What do they do and how do they talk about these things? I think a unified message as a campus community is really, really good. So ultimate goal for any DR office on any campus is going to be that we are not only achieving the equity piece. So here's where we've provided an accommodation for an individual to have equal access, but really the best possible outcome would be to just completely remove the fence for everybody. And then someone else could show up and they don't even have to ask for an accommodation. It's just already done. That's a universal design. I'm pushing through so we can get to the Q&A in our last 10 minutes. So I know it's a little dense and
I have a question. So how do you find working with faculty around accommodations? Like, are most faculty pretty open to hearing about a student's need for accommodation, or do you get pushback, and how do you handle that?
yes. All of the above. It depends. And I think that at any campus, we have fabulous partners and allies within our faculty and academic affairs. We also have faculty that are like, no, I don't do this, or I don't do this. And sometimes we have to drop that compliance hammer. Sometimes we have to say, well, this is really reasonable. Most of the time, if it's like test taking or note taking, you're going to have a hard time substantiating why that's a fundamental alteration to your course or the learning outcomes. But if we have, you know, a request for, like I know Leandra mentioned earlier, presentation adjustment, that is the interactive process we engage with faculty then to say, okay, you know, I hear you saying this isn't reasonable. we do need to document it. We do need to document why we're saying no. Because the student has a right to appeal and or file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights. So we want to engage and make sure we're following our internal policies and procedures properly. And having those conversations with faculty. And, you know, I don't always make friends, and that's okay. What we're doing is what's to be done right for the student and in the student's interest. So yeah, I think it's trying to be collegial and talk through, find alternative solutions, but at the end of the day, we do have to do everything on the up and up. So we compiled a list of resources. If you are interested and want to kind of dive in deeper into any of the tools and or resources, some of them are just functional. If you're in a meeting with a deaf or hard of hearing student and they didn't request an accommodation before that meeting, maybe this free live transcript tool could be super helpful. Okay, we can at least get through this meeting, and then going forward, here's where you need to go to get an accommodation. The online DSM-5 may also be very helpful. While we don't necessarily subscribe to the medical model of disability, we also do believe in licensed professionals who understand and know. So we do use traditional medical documentation as well.
Aubrey, we just got a question wondering if you could talk more about the peer-to-peer support role and what
Yeah.
that looks like and how you find those peer leaders.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we designed the peer engagement coordinator position. Gosh, I think back in 2017 or 2018. Really because we tried to launch a number of just social initiatives, engagement initiatives, because we don't have an identity-based center on our campus compared, you know, to we have a queer resource center or multiracial resource center, or all of the other identity-based centers. Really, disability resources, they really didn't have an equivalent. And we had a lot of students who were looking for community. So we would try and do those things, and they didn't really show up. They don't want to come hang out with professional staff. Go figure. So we built out the peer engagement coordinator position to really talk about, hey, hooking into and helping build a community of disabled students, to provide some programming, and then also a touchstone, as Leandra mentioned, around how to request accommodations, how to build advocacy skills, how to write emails to professors. And we found that just helps feel so much more approachable for students, but also really gives our peer engagement coordinator a lovely paraprofessional role to exercise and build and put on their resume. So yeah, the attendance to those events has been lovely. And it's about 1 or 2 events per term. Last year we did like a film viewing session, and then we do like a conversation panel afterwards, and we led that.
Yeah, we have the May the 4th be with you
May
a
the 4th
couple of
be with
weeks
you.
ago.
Yeah.
So they have origami paper, and then we used to have our study jam before finals week where we did a carnival thing. So students were studying, but at the same time they have a chance to decompress and be more relaxed. But yeah, it's you know, it's been really, really good for the student as an additional tool to connect with our office.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good idea if you don't have it on campus.
Yeah, if you can carve out some money out of your budget, highly recommend.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we are happy to share, we did build out a comprehensive guide for accessible and inclusive events. We're going to share the slide deck with Robin for you all. But you know, anytime you or others on campus are having events and you aren't sure how to make sure it's accessible, hopefully that can be helpful. There's a 1-page checklist, or like almost a 20-page like deep dive if you want.
It is an impressive guide. I'm very appreciative that we're going to get to share that out. And I
Yeah.
think in there is where it talks about things to consider as far as like having captions going or having documents readable. All that's, okay, great.
Yes, yeah. Yep.
Well, everybody is super appreciative and thanking you all. And I'm so grateful that you were able to host this for us and share that partnership that SOU has between TRIO and Disability Resources. And I'm hoping that other institutions have that as well or can help grow it. And potentially sharing out this recording, I'll send it out. And if it's helpful to share with your Disability Resources office, that might be a way to help that partnership as well.
Happily, yeah. If you have colleagues that would like to touch base with us, I've definitely have had those conversations. OATs, director and assistant director, I've had a few conversations, so happy to be in community with you all.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Aubrey and Leandra. This has been
Thank
Thank
great.
you for the invitation.
Of course, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.
All right.